Miles Harrington was 52 years old, a man who had spent nearly 3 decades working the oil rigs scattered across the world's oceans. His hands were calloused, his skin weathered by heat and salt, and his life measured in long rotations at sea and short visits back home. It was during one of those rotations, in the Persian Gulf, that his life changed with the chime of a phone. After a 14-hour shift, still covered in grease, he read the message that shattered 18 years of marriage. "I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old boyfriend. I'm taking all our money with me." The words glowed coldly on his screen, followed by a picture of their joint account balance. What had once held over $140,000 now showed almost nothing. At the end of her message, she had added a playful kiss emoji, as though betrayal could be softened by a cartoon heart. Miles didn't shout. He didn't throw the phone against the steel wall of his bunk. He simply typed back a short reply. "Sure. Good luck." Then he turned the phone off and went to take a shower. The next morning, the men noticed something different in him. He skipped breakfast, went straight to work. Jackson, his second in command, glanced at him more than once, but knew not to ask. On the rigs, personal problems stayed personal. 16 lives depended on focus, and Miles would not let his troubles endanger the crew. At lunch, he checked his email. Krista, his wife of 18 years, had already filed for divorce. She accused him of abandonment, claiming he worked overseas too much, and her lawyer was pushing for spousal support. She even wrote that her emotional support partner was living in their home in Odessa. Miles closed the laptop. He spoke of none of this. That evening, he sent one email, not to Krista, but to his cousin Brendan in Houston, an accountant he trusted more than anyone else. The subject line was simple: "Activate Protocol Winter." Brendan replied within minutes. "Already on it. Do not respond to her again until you're back stateside." Miles still had 2 weeks left in this rotation. 2 weeks of 12-hour days in relentless heat, knowing his marriage had already collapsed. Some men would have asked for emergency leave, but he knew it would change nothing. Better to finish the job, draw the paycheck, and return home prepared. Miles first met Krista 19 years earlier in Odessa, Texas. She was working at the counter of a fishing supply shop owned by one of his buddies. She was 31 then, lively, full of jokes about city people who thought catching bass required an instruction manual. Miles was 33, already 10 years into oil work, home for a short break between contracts. They married less than a year later. Fast, yes, but at the time, it felt right. Miles already had a stable life, a house he owned outright from a lucky investment in a small producer that had been bought out, a career that promised steady income. Krista said she admired his focus, his reliability. He admired her spark, her ability to charm anyone she met. The work schedule was always the challenge. 2 months on the rigs, 1 month off at home. But the money was hard to argue with. Miles could make in 6 months what many in their town earned in 3 years. They both agreed it was worth the sacrifice. He would build their future. She would keep the home fires burning. For years, it worked. They built a life that looked solid from the outside, but cracks eventually appeared. Small ones at first. Complaints about birthdays missed, questions about why he had to take another overseas contract, comparisons to her friends' husbands who were always home for dinner parties. By the 12th year, something had shifted. Krista stopped asking when he'd be home, stopped sending photos of family gatherings or little updates from her days. Their video calls grew shorter. Miles chalked it up to the natural changes of a long marriage. Routine replacing excitement, comfort replacing passion. The previous Christmas should have been a warning. He came home to find the entire house redecorated. New furniture, new colors, new style, all decided without a word to him. When he asked why, Krista simply said, "We needed a change." He didn't press for what kind of change she truly meant. 2 months before his current rotation, Miles noticed transfers from their joint account into another one he didn't recognize. Krista said it was for house repairs, something about the foundation. But when he drove by before leaving for the Gulf, there was no sign of construction. Instead, there was a sleek black Audi parked in their driveway, a car he had never seen before. 4 weeks ago, Krista stopped answering his calls altogether, only short texts saying she was busy with a new project. He almost cut his rotation short then, but convinced himself to trust the woman he had shared 18 years with. 3 days before her final text, their neighbor Harold sent a picture, a moving truck in front of the house. "Thought you should know," was all the message said. Miles stared at it in silence. Sometimes the hardest thing a man can do is nothing at all. Just wait for the truth to reveal itself. And the truth came swiftly. 2 nights after Harold's message, the satellite phone in Miles's quarters rang. On the other end was Brendan, his cousin, the accountant in Houston. "You better sit down," Brendan said. "Just tell me," Miles replied. Brendan didn't soften it. Krista had been planning everything for over a year. She had been quietly transferring money into an account under her maiden name. At first it was small, 2,000 here, 3,000 there. But over the last 3 months, the withdrawals had grown larger. The total wasn't the 142,000 Miles had seen in their joint account. It was over 214,000. And that wasn't all. "She changed the beneficiary on your life insurance policy 6 months ago," Brendan said, "and she took out a $40,000 home equity line of credit against the house. Forged your signature." Miles sat on the edge of his bunk, listening to the steady hum of the rig's generators. 18 years of marriage, almost 2 decades of shared life, dismantled piece by piece behind his back. Finally, he asked the question he dreaded. "Who's the guy?" "Devon Forrester," Brendan answered. 25, just like she said. Former personal trainer. No stable work history in the last 3 years. But 3 past relationships with older women, all of them financially secure. Each one ended within 18 months. Miles didn't need Brendan to spell it out. He already saw the pattern. "And there's one more thing," Brendan said. His voice dropped. "Credit card charges, 2 one-way tickets to Palm Springs, next Tuesday." That was 3 days away. Krista wasn't just leaving. She was vanishing, and she was trying to take everything with her. Miles hung up and sat in the dark. He didn't turn on the light. He just stared at the memories in his head, each one rearranging itself into a different picture. The late-night phone calls she used to take outside. The sudden interest in fitness a few years back. The constant complaints about money, even when their savings were comfortable. The hardest blow wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing just how carefully she had planned it. Every smile, every word, every time she had said she missed him. All while she was dismantling their life piece by piece. Something inside Miles hardened. The hurt solidified into something colder. He walked to his locker, pulled out his laptop, and opened an email account only Brendan knew about. He logged into Winter Holdings, the private company they had quietly established years earlier, after Miles had watched another rig worker lose everything in a divorce. The balance loaded, $1.6 million. For 8 years, Miles had been diverting 70% of his earnings into that account, declared legally, taxed properly, but structured so that it was never part of their shared marital assets. He sent one email to his lawyer in Houston. Subject line, "Proceed with Operation Cold Return." Then he closed the laptop and walked to the mess hall for a cup of coffee. For the first time in days, he felt hungry again. 38 hours after finishing his rotation, Miles landed in Houston. Brendan was waiting at the airport with a folder of documents and a burner phone. "She's been calling your regular number non-stop," Brendan said as they walked toward the parking garage. The bank froze the account she moved the money into. Standard procedure for unusual transfers. They're asking you to come in and verify in person. She doesn't know you're back. In Brendan's car, he handed Miles a tablet. There's something else. On the screen were text messages between Krista and someone saved as D. The messages confirmed everything Brendan had uncovered. The Palm Springs plan, the money, the lies. They joked about Miles working overseas while they built a new life with his money. They even discussed the house they had already put a deposit on. But one exchange chilled Miles more than anything else. Krista. Bank froze the money. Need Miles to verify in person. What do we do? D. He's stuck on the rig for 10 more days. Tell him there's an emergency with your mom. He'll authorize you. You're still his wife. Krista. He won't answer my calls. D. Try harder. We need that money before the closing, or we move to Plan B. Krista. I'm not comfortable with Plan B. D. It's just insurance money. He works a dangerous job for a reason. Accidents happen. Miles's grip on the tablet tightened. Brendan explained. She synced her new phone with your old Apple account. Everything uploads to your cloud. She never changed the password. Later that day, Miles sat in his lawyer Thomas's office. Thomas had already prepared divorce papers, a criminal complaint for forgery, and an emergency motion to freeze all assets. But Thomas warned there was a complication. Krista filed a domestic violence claim against you yesterday. Says she left because of abuse and financial control. She wants a restraining order and exclusive use of the house. Miles leaned forward. I've been 6,000 miles away for the past 7 weeks. Doesn't matter, Thomas replied. It's a tactic to win sympathy with the court. He slid a new document across the desk. But we file this, a motion to dismiss with evidence of perjury. What evidence? Miles asked. Your location data, Thomas said with a thin smile. Your company badge shows you've been on that rig continuously. Passport stamps confirm it. Phone records too. There's no sign of threats or arguments. She's lying. And once we show the judge those texts about Plan B, she'll regret ever filing that claim. Miles signed without hesitation. For now, he was still officially overseas. That illusion was part of the plan. Krista couldn't know he was back. Not yet. That night, Brendan showed him something else. Security camera footage from his own house in Odessa. Miles had installed the system 3 years earlier and maintained it remotely. Krista must have forgotten about it. The video showed a young man lounging by the pool, drinking Miles's whiskey, wearing his old college sweatshirt. Devon. Meanwhile, Krista paced nervously nearby, phone pressed to her ear. Things aren't going the way they planned, Brendan said quietly. Miles said nothing. His hands were steady, but his resolve was turning to steel. The next morning, Brendan dug deeper into Devon's past. What he found painted a picture far worse than either of them expected. Devon's done this before, Brendan explained, turning his laptop toward Miles. 3 times, each time with older women who had stable finances. They leave their husbands, drain accounts, and within 18 months he's gone, with whatever's left. The screen showed old court filings, news articles, and social media posts. 3 women, 3 ruined lives. One was still paying off debts Devon had racked up in her name. Brendan hesitated before continuing. There's more. He was once a person of interest in a suspicious death. A car crash involving one of his girlfriend's ex-husbands. Police never had enough evidence, but the timing... His voice trailed off. Miles understood. That same morning, Krista left a voicemail for Miles. Please, I need you to call the bank. It's a misunderstanding. They froze everything, and I can't access any funds. I'm scared. Please, Miles. Her voice cracked as if she were crying, but Miles didn't buy it. Not anymore. Thomas, the lawyer, laid out the next steps. The emergency hearing is this afternoon. The judge won't tolerate false claims and will present the text messages. Once that happens, Krista's whole case collapses. But Miles wanted something more. "I need to see this with my own eyes," he said. That night, he stayed at Harold's house across the street from his own. Harold, the retired petroleum engineer who'd worked rigs himself, didn't ask many questions. He just opened the blinds and gave Miles a clear view. Krista and Devon spent the evening packing. Moving trucks had come and gone all day. They weren't just fleeing with money. They were stripping the house bare. Furniture, heirlooms, everything. At 3 a.m, Thomas confirmed by text. Krista had forged Miles's signature on a listing agreement. She was trying to sell the house at 30% below market value. By dawn, Miles was done watching from a distance. The sheriff's deputies arrived at 8:55 a.m. with court orders in hand. Miles stepped out from Harold's front porch and walked across the street just as Krista opened the door. Her expression froze. First shock, then fear. "Miles," she whispered, "you're supposed to be on the rig." "Surprise," he said evenly, nodding to the deputies. They handed over the documents: restraining order, asset freeze, nullification of the home sale, divorce proceedings citing fraud and conspiracy. Devon tried to puff himself up. "You can't do this. She's afraid of you." Miles cut him off. "The judge dismissed your claim this morning. Hard to abuse someone from 6,000 miles away, especially when you're busy planning Plan B with my insurance policy." Devon's face went slack. Krista's tears started, but they weren't fooling anyone anymore. "You have 30 minutes, the court officer said. "Clothing and toiletries only. Everything else stays." Krista tried one last plea. "Miles, please." But Miles had already turned away. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Bank records, forged signatures, text messages discussing stolen money, and even an insurance Plan B. When she finished, she looked directly at Krista. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such deliberate, calculated deception inside a marriage," she said firmly. Krista's lawyer tried to soften the damage, but the ruling came swift. All assets Krista had transferred were to be returned to Miles. The house was declared his alone. Spousal support denied. And most importantly, the evidence of forgery and conspiracy was referred to the district attorney. As the hearing ended, Krista tried to approach him in the hallway, but Miles simply kept walking. Some victories, he realized, needed no words. 2 days later, Devon disappeared, taking Krista's last bit of cash and jewelry with him. Brendan had been right. The young man had played this game before, and he had no intention of staying. Krista was left with nothing. 6 months passed. Miles sold the house in Odessa, clearing away memories of betrayal. He moved north to a cabin in the Montana mountains, 40 acres of pine forest and open sky, property he had bought years earlier through Winterlight Holdings. Krista had never known it existed. By then, she had taken a plea deal. No jail time, but 5 years of probation and restitution she could never repay. Devon moved on to another woman in Arizona, repeating his cycle as if nothing had happened. For Miles, though, life finally became quiet. Early retirement, investments and royalties were more than enough to sustain him. He rebuilt his world one day at a time, with no one demanding, no one pretending. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Miles sat on the porch swing he had built that summer, a glass of bourbon in his hand, the cool wind rustling through the pines. For the first time in years, he felt free. His phone rang, a job offer for a consulting position. Good money, minimal travel. He told them he'd think about it. Maybe yes, maybe no. For once, it didn't matter, because sometimes the strongest answer to betrayal isn't revenge, it's peace. And in that quiet cabin in Montana, Miles finally found his.